What's the basis for spaceships except for conveyance to escape the matrix? No, but it's more than you've seen it do. I promise you that my bars is rap genius proof, and I'd rather take the scenic route. I'm not the type that you see in groups.
Okay, welcome back to Hold This Mic. I'm Josh Kurz-Burchard, and
I'm Akil.
And we're here in South Philadelphia for our next episode, kind of continuing on from the last one. It is March 4th. It's a Sunday. There's no NFL, but there's the Sixers, as we already have discussed, and they put in a little compromise.
You know why there's no NFL? Because the Eagles ended the NFL.
The Eagles abolished the NFL.
They won the championship, and now the NFL is no more.
So yeah, we're gonna jump into our issues list because we got nice and prepared this time. First of all, we want to address the tax cuts, which probably are going into effect as we speak, and they were passed into law last December in 2017. Mm-hmm. Something like that, December, November, somewhere in there. And as we knew, the tax cuts were mostly about the corporate tax cut aspect, and they also were about individual tax breaks, but the corporate tax breaks are permanent, and the individual tax breaks run out fairly quickly. The thing about the corporate tax breaks is what? They... Akil, can you tell us some about what the corporate tax breaks are really all about?
Well, they were sold as, putting money back into corporations and businesses, and then in turn, those corporations would put the money back into their employees, back into investment, make new stores, make new products, blah, 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 blah. And I think what we actually saw them do was do massive stock buybacks. Since the bill...
What is a stock buyback, in case our audience is wondering?
So when you have a publicly traded company, there's a number of stocks that people can buy, and those stocks gain and lose value with how much the company is valued at. What companies like to do is go out and buy back those stocks from the individuals that own them. When they have surplus profits, like to buy back stocks. And what this does is it removes the amount of publicly available stocks from the market. When you take products out of a market, the price for that product goes up. Thus, people who want to buy stock in that company have to pay a higher price, and
that's more profit.
And it's more profit, and it looks better on the company's books. So the CEO of that company gets a huge bonus. It's basically a trick to inflate the price of your company so that the CEO who's doing it can say that they've earned their $3 million bonus.
Right. And they can say to the board that they met their earnings goals in each quarter or whatever it might be. They can put the money probably wherever they want, really, as long as it's within the company, and they can say, our value has gone up.
Yeah. So that's why they do it. But they sold it as raises are going to go up because companies will have more profit. Well, that's interesting because since...
you mean like raises for who?
Raises for the workers, for the average worker. For the people who voted for Donald Trump thinking that he was a friend of the common man. Ha ha. This is who this was supposed to help, right? So since the Republican tax bill went into effect, because even before, since it's been signed in December, because even before it went into effect, companies were announcing like, oh, we're going to give bonuses to these employees, and we're going to...
Right, it was a show to try to garner support for the tax cut.
So how much money you think retail companies and other companies have announced that employees will get in terms of a monetary value?
Well, one thing I know is that even at the hint of higher wages, the stock market took a plunge, which is sort of a separate issue.
Yeah.
But it's tied in.
Oh yeah.
So
definitely
like investors don't like the idea of higher wages. It means higher costs of production, and then it means less profits for the companies.
Right. They're short-sighted sociopaths, so they're wrong. But yeah, that's what they think.
Yeah, and they're just gambling as well because most of what they do is speculative.
Right.
But anyway.
Yeah. So how much money do you think companies have pledged back to employees?
Like as a whole in the U.S.?
Whole, yeah.
Oh, geez, I don't know. I mean, the tax breaks were bringing the profit, taxing companies from 35% they were taxed before, now it's down to 20. So that's, hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars. Mm-hmm. And the amount that they're promising back to wages, I mean, I don't want to guess because I can imagine it's low, but I don't want to
No, you might be surprised. Just throw out a wild number.
All right, 50 billion.
Okay, a little lower than that.
How much?
3 billion.
What? God. And 3 billion. To put that in perspective, like Amazon as a company is worth probably 90 or 100 billion.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe even more than that.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest companies in the world.
Yeah.
I should have used that example. Let's say Dick's Sporting Goods, which just...
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to buy Dick's Sporting Goods, you'd probably have to spend over $100 billion.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're saying $3 billion in wage increases for middle and lower earners.
Yeah. So how much do you think they've announced in stock buybacks?
Who's the source? Just so we.
This is HuffPo.
Huffington Post.
Yeah.
And what's their source?
Their source is they have quotes from a professor of economics at University of Massachusetts. But wait, let me.
Yeah, that's enough for me.
Yeah. I mean, it is HuffPo and, whatever, but this is what they've announced. This is, publicly available information.
And this isn't even, wage increases that have gone into effect. This is, what companies are saying they're going to do.
Yeah. This is,
Right.
And this is, mostly bonuses. When Walmart says they're going to give raises to people who've been there for 20 years.
Right.
And
the whole, unbelievable fallacy of this is that, the public. This is the fallacy of democracy in action or inaction. That people are going to find out these numbers, process them, and people are supposed to vote with their pocketbooks, but our education system has really failed a lot of people, and we're kind of in large part, there's a large portion of the population which is not going to be up on the facts about how much wage increases are happening or not happening. So when they hear that Trump had a tax cut, that's all the information they got.
Yeah, they got $1.50 extra in their paycheck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or none extra in their paycheck. That's what that. Yeah. Oh, no. That's what that status.
No, I think the number that I read was I think it's about 31% of people are going to see
an increase
in their paychecks, and most of that is going to be the middle to upper class.
Right. So it's a sham. It's a complete scam on people who earn less, and some of them voted for Trump, and they may or may not be fully aware of what this actually means, but it's sad. It's really sad and pathetic. Okay, let's keep moving. So there was just keeping with the tax cuts theme, there was a strike in West Virginia by teachers because basically it came down to a bonus versus a wage increase, right?
I think it was just they haven't had a raise in 5 years.
They haven't had a raise in 5 years.
Yeah.
And I think it was that, or it was a different story, but it's a common story. Is that these companies are tricking people by giving them a nice cash payout once a year, but if they increase wages to like a fair level, the people would get a lot more in earnings.
Yeah, and they would buy a lot more, which in turn would make businesses make a lot more, and which in turn would make them hire a lot more, and like that's how economies work. But we've convinced ourselves that just cutting taxes and making sure that companies can pay whatever they want, or in this case, the government can only pay but so much because of those tax cuts.
Yeah.
Then so these people haven't had a raise in a long time. They've got rising healthcare premiums that they have to pay, where the healthcare premiums have gone up steadily for the last 10 years and their wages have stayed the same. Mm-hmm. So, do the math on that.
Right.
And this is our education system. These are teachers. These are the people that are supposed to prepare our stupid little kids to go out and be productive adults. And we're like, well, just get by on,
less and less.
On less and less and less.
Yeah,
and
it's terrible. Okay.
One more tax story with Delta.
Oh, is that a tax story?
It's kind of a tax story because what they did was, and this one's a little interesting. I think there's a little bit it's a little bit more complex than it first seems. So did we discuss it last time about the lieutenant governor of Georgia threatening Delta because they cut ties with the NRA?
Right.
Yeah. So
no, we did. I don't think we did talk about it, but it's happened since.
So it's happened since, and what they did was they passed a tax cut bill, and he's got his Twitter photo of him saying like, we've passed the largest tax cut bill in Georgia history or whatever. But included in that was getting rid of the subsidies that the state of Georgia gave Delta for jet fuel. Okay. So this was, and the guy already announced it, this was in direct retaliation for them cutting ties with the NRA, which, I'm sorry, I thought that was the whole point of guns, was to shoot at lawmakers who would punish private citizens for making free association or not having free association with other private citizens. I don't know, that sounds like tyranny to me. Where's the NRA at? Like, shouldn't they be like marching to the Georgia Capitol with their AR-15s and demanding freedom from tyranny? But whatevs.
Yeah. So now they're talking about Delta having had a. Is this what you're? I don't think you were mentioning this specifically. Delta had a deal with NRA members.
Yeah, it was basically, it's a promotion. So, if you're an NRA member, you can show your membership and get a couple bucks off a flight, or maybe a free check bag, or like a professional Velt line case for your gun or something.
And
like
the temperature on guns changed, and Delta smelled like trouble, so they went ahead and decided to take that advantage for NRA members away. But as soon as they started talking about doing that, the Georgia State House said,
the lieutenant governor.
And that's what you're talking about. Yeah. Which is, I'm trying to get this straight for myself. So the lieutenant governor said, if you follow through with taking this NRA privilege away at Delta, then we're gonna give this tax break that we've always given to Delta on jet fuel. That's what it was on.
Yeah.
We're going to give this tax on jet. We're going to retract the tax on jet fuel, making it much more expensive for Delta to operate in Georgia, and they were punishing Delta for having suggested a change in their policy.
Yeah.
And that's what you're talking about, the overreach of government.
Yeah, exactly. It's NRA is a private organization. Delta is a private organization. They had an arrangement. Now one of the parties is saying, I don't want to have that arrangement anymore.
Right.
The government's saying, based on that, we're going to make a law specifically to punish you.
Risking that Delta would book from Georgia and go somewhere else.
Right.
You know, and they're playing with fire because Delta could do that. In fact, there's been like news reports like, oh, like New York State courting Delta, like, you know, because it's a big enough punishment for them that, like, if they want to stick to their guns, so to speak, and, you know, move to a different state, they can.
Well, and just we'll cap this story off with a nice bit of delicious comedy. Delta has just weighed in, and according to USA Today and CNN Money's reporting this also, Delta said only 13 people used the NRA discount when it was in effect. So I don't know who.
Gun owners might not be frequent flyers.
Gun owners usually fly American Airlines. Let's be real. So
or not at all.
Yeah, they ride their horses. Come on, like they're gonna get in a fancy wing, you know, God-defying anti-gravity device, or are they gonna get on their Clydesdales and ride like a true cowboy?
Right. All right. So, we're going to skip the dreadlock story.
Yeah, we'll skip it.
You want to fill it in real quick?
Well, it was an older story, but I came across it, you know, looking up stuff for today's show.
And what's it?
Basically, a court ruled that employers can legally discriminate against people based on having dreadlocks. Yeah. So we live in a world where if you're a black person wearing a historically natural black hairstyle that, you know, means a lot to a lot of people, you can be fired because it, quote unquote, looks sloppy. Okay, you fucking colonizers. That's all I gotta say about it.
No, that's heavy shit, man. All right. Okay, immediate reactions.
We covered that.
Announcement about tariffs, global reactions, and okay, this last piece of item is one that means a lot to me because I was brought up by my mom, who got the New York Times for free at work, and you know, when I did read the paper when I was younger, I read the New York Times, and then as I got older, I was and became more of a reader of news. I read the New York Times, and the New York Times includes an opinion section, an editorial section that has traditionally taken you know, positions on issues using a lot of logic and reason and conviction and, you know, promoting human rights, promoting, you know, what we think of as liberal issues and taking a stand in their op-ed section. However, there was an article in the Huffington Post which puts all that stuff into which exposes the New York Times for having had a meeting with its new editor-in-chief of the opinion section. I think his name is James Bennett, and they basically in this article, because they got access to a transcribed, they got access to recordings of a meeting that James Bennett had with New York Times employees when he was, you know, coming up with, when he was answering their questions. A lot of them had very concerned questions because a lot of New York Times journalists still believe in the importance of, you know, sticking to the truth and sticking to liberal values, which aren't, you know, just values. They're more science-based and they're more more heavily researched, more right. So this guy Bennett, here's a quote. It says, "It was as frank an explication as Bennett has given of how he conceives of the opinion section. Slaloming between contradictions, Bennett laid out an ideology of no ideology. The editorial page is beholden to no priors except when it is. It proudly forswears the idea of right answers except when it doesn't. It is humanist and ecumenical, but also of the belief, for instance, that some kinds of ethnic cleansing are worthy of debate.
Oh,
and in this instance, they reference, an opinion writer who wrote an article basically saying that there was no point in treating Palestinians as people who could form their own state. Like that time has come and gone, and it's either that you're going to be someone who is a right wing Israeli sympathizer, or maybe a right wing Israeli, wrote an op-ed, and that's what they published. Going on, he says, completely, like with a lot of I don't know, it's very upsetting. He says, "The world needs this from us right now," Bennett told the dozen or so New York Times staffers in the room. "I don't mean to sound pious, but it really is true that this is a crude and dangerously polarized time. And to simply assert that we know what the right answers are is not good for democracy."
What if
So he's being a fuckface. And the idea that, he's tacking to the middle and the right is really upsetting. There's a new owner of the New York Times, the son of Arthur Oak Schultzberger, who I believe is also named Arthur Schultzberger, but I'm not sure, who's obviously backing this, and it's just, it's kind of like what you're talking about with, the Democratic Party accepting the press, and for it to be the New York Times is just incredibly shocking and unsettling.
Is it kind of shocking for
The New York Times has been an outstanding newspaper for a long time.
It was also the newspaper that pushed for the Iraq War. It's also the newspaper that covered up the Iraq War when its own reporters was trying to tell them that, there was no evidence.
I think that's a selective picking out of certain.
It's not selective. It's what happened. The paper.
So
the paper done a lot of good.
So the New York Times took a consistent stance on the Iraq War that was, we need to go in and fight and get these weapons of mass destruction.
They immediately went to the establishment stance. They immediately went with the official government stance instead of looking at what their own reporters were bringing to them about the veracity.
Okay, fine. That could be true.
I mean, it is true. You talk. He's on the Intercept now, but I can't think of his name right now. But he works for the Intercept now. But he was a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter from the New York Times. Had the story about. I want to say he had the Warless wiretapping story before it was wiki leaked out, and the NYT basically told him, hold on to the story, hold the story. We're waiting for confirmation from frickin' Dick Cheney. Or, Dick Cheney wants us to hold this story. And they held the story until they got scooped by WikiLeaks. But, that's so important. I'm not saying that negates all the good things that the New York Times has done, all the good reporting that it has published. I'm just saying that.
Yeah, the way I feel about that is that, there's going to be times when, like you described, when the New York Times has done the wrong thing. I think the difference here is that this is about the opinion section.
Yeah.
And the opinion section is where the debate happens. And so what was shocking to me was, I'm not it's not like I've been an avid New York Times reader for 20 years. As I've gotten older, I read more and more. And what's the problem about the opinion section is very startling, the way he talks about the opinion section, because it's not just they're holding a story and they're reluctant to take a chance on the truth with the Iraq War, which sounds like they did.
Oh, it wasn't they
according to
were
what you're
reluctant.
saying.
It was that the government told them not to, and they didn't want to lose
Yeah.
access.
Okay. Yeah.
So they
then that's terrible. That's terrible. It's bad journalism, and it's bad for the country and for the world. But what I'm saying is that, you know, for the opinion section and the governance of the opinion section to now be saying, you know, essentially that like there is no like we're not even considering that there is a right point of view.
yeah.
That's upsetting.
Yeah, it is upsetting. I don't think it's a huge leap to go. Like it doesn't surprise me as much as it seems to surprise you. But that's the disease of centrism.
I mean, the New York Times is called the journal of record. It's
the news that's fit.
Every you know, I mean not every, but like a lot of people who are really well educated and are in academia or whatever, that's the newspaper they read. And, you know, it doesn't mean that there would be, you know, that they wouldn't have done wrong things. I'm not doubting that at all. All I'm saying is that now they're not even trying to hide it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if they were really trying to hide it before. They're in the New York Times. They can print what they want. No one's, you know, like you said, they're the journal of record. Very influential people wake up in the morning and they pick up their copy of the NYT or they go on their app and they read it.
Yeah, and that matters.
It matters, and it matters. But I'm saying it mattered a long time ago too. It didn't just start mattering because of the opinion section, which I agree. What they're doing in the opinion section is gross, and what he said about it is even grosser. I mean, you know, they fired the one woman who was a Nazi sympathizer before she had a chance to write an article, but they definitely were going to have her write articles for them.
Right. I mean, it's like what's a publication that you think is reliably like getting to the truth of things?
You know, you talking about straight news. I would go, you know, like The Guardian. I think does a lot of good work.
That's a British newspaper.
It's a British newspaper.
What's like an American newspaper?
I don't really know. Except they all have their you know, Washington Post has broken really great stories in the past, and they continue to break some pretty, you know, good stories. They're one of the last outlets where you can see a lot of good investigative journalism, but they still have their own issues with, you know, siding overly with the centrist point of view to the, you know, even when it's crazy to be a centrist. They're like, oh, we gotta look at both sides, gotta play the center.
Right. I mean, like, you know, there's publications like The Nation, which is a left-wing publication, which drives hard at the, you know, getting to the bottom of things and not, you know, glossing over, you know, the injustice or the contradictions or whatever. And, you know, that kind of journalism, like, I also grew up with that, and, you know, that is you know, that's a more in-depth and like very persistent and you know, just constantly striving to get to the bottom of stories, which ends up being that they're very left wing, and it's kind of like, you know, like, I don't know, in my view, like the New York Times, the Washington Post, some other newspapers are like ways to get stories and opinion, and it's just, you know, and they are establishment institutions for sure, and like that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody either. But I also think that the establishment, and I think where we differ a little bit, is that the establishment, except of course with tons of exceptions, you know, the Democratic establishment, the liberal establishment, you know, they're in charge of a lot of resources and power, and they have some things to offer that are really watered down and or just spineless, and they have some things to offer that are really important and keep this country together. So it's like a newspaper might give you a mixture, and especially when they stop having a true opinion page. But I just,
Yeah.
I don't see the problem getting as big as to when your opinion editor is and board is saying like we're not taking a stance. That's when it's a problem.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would just argue that it's a bigger problem when it leads to like millions of deaths in another country. But like by backing the Iraq War, ignoring the evidence to the contrary.
I'm not sure that that's true.
I mean, it's the paper of record. Like people were.
I don't think that they only wrote articles that hid the truth from the American people.
No, it's not. They only wrote articles validating the government's position that there was weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and we had to attack.
But is that the only position that the paper took?
Yeah, until
so
it became
no
clear.
one published articles saying that we need to question whether or not there were weapons of mass destruction.
Not in the run-up, no. And I'm pretty sure that the people who were trying to write those articles either didn't get permission to run them or it got those like pushed back to like below the fold or not even in the front page. Like if I'm remembering correctly, and I'm pretty sure I remember, like the New York Times wasn't really that open to the opinion or the any stories that would suggest that the Iraq War didn't need to happen. And then like a lot, and that was the tenor of media at the time. You remember Phil Donahue got fired from MSNBC for being against the Iraq War. Mm-hmm. MSNBC.
Yeah.
And now they're all like, yeah, the Iraq War was never used. If you supported it, then you shouldn't be. No, right. They supported it. They all supported it.
Right.
And I think that like buying into the government, and that was part of their centrist ethos was that.
Well, they were also fed intelligence by the government that was false.
Sure,
and
but
they were fed. They were sold on, the story coming out of the Pentagon and out of the CIA and so on.
But the point is, they didn't like. Of course, the government is going to give you the story that makes them look like they're in the best light and they're right.
Right.
Their job as the fourth estate is to confirm that. And when they find evidence that doesn't support what the government is saying, it's their job to report that. And I think it comes from the impetus to believe what the people in power are saying and run with that as the official story over, evidence to the contrary, reporters telling you that something doesn't feel right. I think that's the same mindset and ethos that says that, makes you believe that running opinions from ethno-nationalists and racists and people who believe in bunk science or don't believe in global warming. I think that's the same mindset that gets you there. It's this idea that there really isn't any true statements. There isn't any real. Everything.
Right, and that's what they're talking about at the editorial level.
Right, but I'm saying like that's like we've seen samples of that in there.
Yeah, but I don't believe that no one in the New York Times reported skeptically about the presence of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and I'll find that out. And if I'm wrong, then I'll totally admit it.
Hey, people have something to look forward to on the next show.
All right. Cool. All right. Well, we went through our whole list, and we hit the nail on the head with every last point we made.
And we're only slightly under 2 hours this time. Only
slightly under 2 hours. So for those of you hardcore fans that are still have your ears to your earbuds, we want to thank you, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah. Have a good one.
But some dudes needed to. Just because you think what you see is true. No, this is just hallucination. We basically escaping from hallucination. Making do with fake is just a new vacation. So it seems so concerned with the scene. I prefer a lucid dream. Dream on. Dream of nights like these. Dream of taking flight. Dream of heights like these. Dreams is fucking nice. Get right like me. I'ma be alright. Man, I do this nightly. Yeah. You should tell me what you know. Now you should tell me what you see. I think it's gonna be a very nice night. I think it's gonna be like it was all a dream. You should tell me what you know. Now you should tell me what you see. I think it's gonna be a very nice night. I think it's gonna be like it was all a dream. And any dream can turn nightmare. I'm right here looking for my buzz like light. Yeah. What's the basis for spaceships except for conveyance to escape the matrix? No, but it's more than you've seen it do. I promise you that my bars is rap genius proof. And I'd rather take the scenic route. I'm not the type that you see in groups.
Okay, welcome back to Hold This Mic. I'm Josh Kirsch-Burchard, and we're here in South Philadelphia for our next episode, kind of continuing on from the last one. It is March 4th. It's a Sunday. There's no NFL, but there's the Sixers.